Good evening, good evening, good evening, everybody. Good evening. Waiting on people to come in. How are you doing? How is life? Um, you know, Hearing about all the things that are happening in the world right now. Life is out here lifing. We got bombs happening. We got all kind of stuff going on. Um, but how are you? How's your soul? How are things happening in your life? Um, what you do today to find some joy? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Give people time to clock in, clock in. I'm a little late. Had a couple meetings I had to tend to and make sure I share it on my pages. Uh, Make sure you share it on your pages. We're going to talk about salvation tonight with your saved, sanctified self. We're going to have a conversation about what it means. What's salvation? What does it look like for you and the people around you? Come on in the room. Uh, let's go ahead and get started. So, Sunday, I preached a sermon from Luke chapter 4, verse 18, called The Mission to Salvation. Within this sermon, really the context of it is that we are not just saved um, to be saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Spirit, to really just be alone. It's not an individualistic salvation. And many times, a lot of us have been taught that when we walk down the aisle and shake the pastor's hand, or we go to the room, or however your church does it, that once you get saved, it's an individual relationship, but not really realizing that your salvation is supposed to free you. So, literally, save you. Um, but there's work involved, so it's not this imaginary salvation that you're supposed to get that comes up and, oh my god, I'm saved, and you tell people you're saved and something happens. But it's supposed to be liberating. The questions even ask yourself when you get saved is, what am I being saved from, and what am I being saved to? So naturally, we all believe, I think I talked about last time, that we all have a calling that we have to go to. So in the midst of that calling, what would you say that you're saved to or saved from? So the Lord saved me from what? Because that's kind of what sustains you. And it may change throughout your life. I'm consistently being saved from something, but I'm also saved to something. And that's also cyclical, that keeps going continually. And many times we have this, I just got saved because the Bible says all I got to do is say that I believe in the Lord, right? But you are supposed to believe in the Lord, but there's also a mission attached to that belief. So just believing in the Lord may or may not get you into heaven, but what it will do is assign you to some type of mission. I deeply believe that you just don't walk down the aisle to say you saved and Jesus like, good job, but now you have an assignment. So thank you for coming into the kingdom. So now you can find something to do. But within that doing, it's not a job per se, but it is a job in that you are required. There's something that is required of you. Your salvation should heal you. So I think that's the fuss nowadays. That's the argument. That's the tension with the church, is that a lot of us are saved, but a lot of us aren't healed. So what are you doing with your salvation? How can we be so saved, so filled with the Spirit of the Lord, but yet we're not healed? We're not even attempting to be healed. We're not attempting to be liberated from the things that hold us down. And I know these words, right? I said in my sermon, you say liberation, you say freedom, and folks kind of tense up. But there's something within your body. Yeah, that's the language we use, but there's something within your body that should feel free, that should feel liberated. And that is the purpose of your salvation, is to have a moment of saying, I'm healed from this situation. I'm healed from this mindset. I'm healed. And what I'm healed from now takes me to do the work. Many times we don't realize that our faith is not individualistic, and we have been indoctrinated in believing that you are saved for yourself. But the truth is, you're really saved. This is a communal faith. So you're saved for the people around you. You are saved so that there are people that you are going to connect with in the world, whether it's in the bathroom at the airport, or it's your family member and your cousin. But you are saved for a purpose. And the ideal is for you to reach into that. What am I saved for? What am I supposed to be doing? Many of us have never even considered, what was I saved from and what am I saved to? The saving to is the destination to healing whatever you got going on in your body and in your life. We all got stuff we have to be healed from. Now, some people say they were saved as children and all that, and I think that's amazing, because I think that person picked out early that I'm gonna need the Lord by my side real soon and real quick. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then there's some of us who we didn't get saved till later because we needed some type of deliverance. And what's supposed to happen is an internal as well as an external deliverance that has to happen within our bodies. And we sit with this idea, or we miss the fact that God is actually transforming us. It's just what we either do with that transformation, or it is what we allow to happen with it. So the Lord may be working on you right now on some things, and whether you accept it or resist it really turns into whatever you heal or not. So we are not always healing, not because God isn't providing a way for us to heal, but because we are resistant to that type of healing. We refuse to be healed, kind of deal. And here's why we refuse to be healed. There's more benefit, there's more reinforcement. If we talk about human behavior, it is more reinforcing to be unhealed. And as crazy as that sounds, it is a very more reinforcement for society for you to be unhealed, for you to be out here crazy, for you to live in your trauma. Is money in that, like capitalist America, right? There's money in you not being healed. If you're not healed, then people have the ability to use you. If you're not healed, people can exploit you, and that will distract you from the purpose that God has for you. So the question really sits in, what kind of validation, what type of affirmation are you seeking? Have you worked on yourself to sit with therapy, to sit with boundaries, to come to a place to say, I can't do this because I want to be delivered and saved and healed from this? And while we take this ideal of salvation to be a holier than thou kind of concept, but the truth is, it's how you walk out your faith. That's the baseline of your salvation. How do I live from day to day? What do I do from day to day? Not does it show that I'm healed, but am I internally healed? So nothing can bother me. Yes, there's bombs that are flying, and yes, we are concerned. And yes, there's some things we're paying attention to. But at the end of the day, I still got to walk with my faith and know what's going on in the world. Now, again, put a pin in it. I ain't telling nobody to ignore it and spiritual bypass your life. But even within that, don't spiritual bypass it. Sit in it. Sit in the way that you feel when you heard that was happening. Some people were scared. There's some folks was on TikTok buying a little bug kit. Like, all these things were occurring, and all that should be occurring at the same time. You should also live in your faith. And I think many times we forget that we are called to live within our faith and what our faith has to look like each and every day. So a real question would be, do you even recognize that your salvation is more than just the removal of sin, right? We like to tend to look at our salvation from a standpoint of sin, but do you recognize that your salvation is more than that? That, yes, sin plays a role in it, but isn't more. Did God just call you, or did Jesus just die on his cross for you to just not sin, for you not to eat too much? What was the purpose? There has to be something in it. So your salvation, I would argue, is directly connected to your purpose in life. What are you doing in the world, and how is it helping other people? And that's really the validation of salvation, is sitting and saying, I know that I'm called to this. And because I am called to this, I stand 10 toes down on that calling. And we allow people at times to defer us from what we were called to, because of their own insecurities. So because they don't want you to do that, because it does not benefit them, now you don't move in your calling. And now you've spent 10 years in a circle trying to figure out what to do, because You ain't do what the Lord told you to do. You didn't do what that small, quiet, still voice has requested for you to do. So you sit in a space wondering what's going on in your life. And it's really, there was a call. You were supposed to answer what God asked you to do years ago, and you refused not to because cousin, sister, brother talked you out of it. Standing 10 toes down on your faith really takes a lot of, I don't want to keep using the word healed, but takes a lot of focus and a lot of willingness to be restored. And we don't recognize that there are a lot of things that we need to be restored from. And many times people feel selfish wanting restoration. What do you mean, right? When people are looking for a sense of restoration, many times you hear that from a standpoint of give me my, what the devil stole is to what I'm supposed to get back. But sometimes restoring yourself is restoring who you are authentically back to who God called you to. And we live through life, and life happens and things occur where you've ever stopped and said, I used to be like this, and never realized, why did you leave that? Now, some people say I used to be like this, and you probably need to leave that person. You probably need to leave that mentality and or that attitude. We ain't talking about that. We're talking about where there's something sitting in your soul that's not whole, that's breaking you apart, and you have to figure out how to get back to that. And that's a part of your salvation. That's living out your salvation. I use the text Luke 4:18 simply because Jesus is sitting around all his friends and family that he grew up with, and he's telling them, hey, the Lord has called you to do the following things. And I think a lot of times we take for granted what the Lord has called us to do in the simplicity of this text. And I'm looking to see if it's pulled up, because I don't want to read it wrong, and then y'all be all in the messages talking about she don't know the Bible. So let me make sure that I get it right. And reading it in the text, if you're familiar with the text, it comes from the book of Isaiah. But you have Jesus saying, he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring the good news to the poor. And part of my sermon started with the good news. And sometimes we have an expectation that we are supposed to be the good news. And sometimes you just have to talk about the good news, that there are days in your life where you cannot be the good news. Like life is life, and life is hard. The day is rough. Things are happening. I can't be good news. I don't have no good news today. You can't force out. I woke up this morning. There are people really sitting with chemical imbalances and sitting with depression and anxiety and a list of other things, that saying it was a good day is hard, right? But there are good days. So you have the ability to proclaim the good news, even if you don't feel like you can be the good news. I think a lot of times as Christians or people who love Jesus, we tend to feel like we have to live out or be something that we're not in the moment, that we get to ignore how we feel. Feelings are fleeting. So you get the ability to feel how you feel when you feel it. It's going to go away. You don't get to live in it. You don't get to stay in it, but you always get to feel how you want to feel. So when you're feeling that, when that happens, you do have to sit with, okay, but things can change. There should always be a but this will change, a semicolon. This is how I feel today, but this will end up changing me. It also talks about being given the good news to the poor. And I think that's a moment where you have to sit in and say, it could have been me. What's that Kirk Franklin song? It could have been me. It could have been you. Like it could have been you. So the good news is to tell somebody, I know that my life could have looked like yours. And there's a possibility that even though it could have looked like yours, there's some aspects of your life that I probably wish I have. So if we sit and talk to each other, but that's also not poor in income, that's poor in spirit, poor in thoughts. Like sometimes we see this and we look at it with our American capitalist eyes, and we think poor is in finances, but sometimes we're sending it to the poor. We're sending it to the immigrants who are struggling right now. They are the people who right now may be poor in spirit because of everything that's going on in the world. In the country, and everything is going on in the world now. So very much just kind of sitting with that. Then we go to releasing the captives, proclaim the release of the captives. It is important that we as Christians have the ability to proclaim our release of what is holding us captive. That many times, as I said earlier, we truly, truly sit in this idea that it is better to proclaim our captivity. So we would rather proclaim what is wrong instead of proclaiming the release of what is wrong. So I would rather say that I'm struggling with this. We trauma bonding left and right. Here's my trauma. Here's my issues. Here's what I live with. I don't like this person. I don't like this system. I can't stand this. We sit in all of that. We live in all of that. We got Facebook and, and all the books and all the Snapchats because of trauma bonding. We get excited knowing that somebody else is going through our same struggle. But what happens when you sit in your struggle, you live in your struggle, it's a real struggle that you have. But what happens when you proclaim your release? Let me talk to folks and say that I'm healed from this. And when you start saying I'm healed from this, that's when your soft life start happening. You move into a soft life. The reality is that now I am healed. I can proclaim my release of a thing. I don't know if we're supposed to run around and talk about all of our traumas and the things that we're going through. I think it's okay if you want to meet a friend, but if that person is not great at helping you, now we moved on to the next line, and now we got the blind out here. So the reality is yeah, you can tell people your issues. Yes, you need a therapist. Yes, you're going. But what happens to you internally when you have the ability to proclaim your release? God, I am free of this. Before you free of it, let me tell you, Lord, I'm free. I will have this. There's a release that's on my body. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to handle this. And let's even get into mental health, because life is out here right now. You can proclaim the release of depression and anxiety, but you also need to take your medication, because you can't proclaim something you're not actively working on. So you also need to proclaim it and be actively working on your release of it. So there's nothing wrong. And I think it's not a name it and claim it kind of deal. It is a process. It is an unpacking of what has held us captive. We all have something that is holding us captive, and finding out what is that thing that's holding me captive. And now let me start proclaiming the release of that and doing the work to get that release fully. If your girl keeps saying that she's 140 pounds, at some point I got to be 140 pounds, because I got to do the work to be 140 pounds. That's the goal. Now, don't proclaim that you don't plan on being. But if you plan on being something and that's the goal, and you plan to do the work to do it, there's nothing wrong with saying you're healed. I'm healed. I can handle this. I'm healed because I got to make sure I'm healed so that my baby's healed. I got to make sure I'm healed so that my family is healed. I got to make sure I'm healed so that my community is healed. And there's a lot of people out here unhealed, but still proclaiming. And sometimes that's okay, because you're working in a space, you're unpacking, you're processing what you're going through. And that's part of the call. That's part of your mission, to have the ability to say, I want to proclaim to you that there will be a release done to the captives. Now, when I preached, I put a pin in it. Listen, mass incarceration is real, and it's a subject we need to sit around and talk about. We need to have the discussions. We need to rally around the organizations that deal with that. I just didn't cover that heavy within my sermon. That wasn't really for my congregation. But that's a conversation for people also. We need to talk about how we treat prisoners, how we treat people who've come out of prison. That's equally a conversation. So we can go into the depths of internally and how we feel captive, but we can also look at some real prisoners and some real folks who are held captive and deal with that as well, because that's also we don't got to dig too deep. We ain't got to get in the depths and go deeply theological to say, hey, release the captives. There are people who are in jail who should not be in jail. Release them, and be able to have those conversations. Then we go into the blind. We talk about the blind will see. It's a lot of people out here blind, especially now. There are 375 million forms of Blackness, and everybody on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook has a new way of how you should be Black, and a new way of how you should be a Christian, and a new way. Everybody out here just with their eyes closed, wandering, not knowing, like, there's some basics to this thing. Like, if you just read your Bible, there are some basics. Yes, it's contradictory. Yes, it's all of that. But on the baseline of being a Christian, read your Bible, follow what Jesus said, do. I know Paul, we'll have talk later in life about how I feel about Paul. But the reality is that if you follow the way of Jesus, the way, you should get to what you need, even though you don't have those specifics. But there are a lot of people who are out here blind and unable to see. And I use the example, the illustration in my sermon when I used to teach school. In order to teach people how to communicate, I used to blindfold. You blindfold one kid and the kid would have to pick their partner, and the partner they pick normally is someone that they're close to. So I didn't tell them to pick a stranger. You pick someone you're close to because you're learning communication. How do I communicate? And this person now has to guide you through the room. Now what ends up happening is the person who is blindfolded believes that they know the room, so they start walking ahead of the person who's communicating. But also the person who's communicating, if it's a child, if they're little kids, then they get distracted by what's happening over there and forget who they're communicating to. And what that tends to happen when we talk about this communal faith is that you have been called for a purpose for someone, and then you get distracted because it looks better on the other side or it looks better somewhere else. And the person who you're supposed to be in alignment with and who God has paired you to and who you're supposed to be ministering to and talking to and on a journey with, you think they're not worthy, but they're waiting on you to communicate effectively for them to make the next move. So that ends up happening. So the question really is how well can you communicate? And maybe there are some of us who need new communicators. Some of us who people just don't know how to tell us to stop. They tell us late. They they ain't paying attention. They, go forward. They think we can do things we can't do, but they're not willing to work hand in hand authentically with who we are, the space we are in, and journey with us through whatever life is bringing us through. So we have this kind of communication problem, and then we do it to God. So God is telling us stop, go left, and we like, don't worry, God, I got it. I know this room. I've been here before. And God is like, nobody told you. Okay, go ahead, bump your head. Go ahead, go through that. Go ahead and hit that chair again. So you sit with that process over and over again because you're not listening to the one who was ultimately communicating, or the one that God sent you to communicate to you. And there are some of us who have been blind for so long, we've been comfortable with it. Like, we cool. We real cool with just sitting in blindness and not having the ability to move. We've become comfortable with not knowing. I think that's equally the tension in the church, that there are some things that we have closed our eyes to, or we pretend like we don't know that's happening within our church, within our jobs, within our homes, like in all spaces of our life, that we close our eyes to, assuming that we know what is, or somebody else will do it. We leave it for someone else to do it. So we stay blind to what's happening in the world and then have the audacity to say we're saved. Eek. So it's a matter of really knowing how to live out and walk out your faith, to be able to say, hey, we are to help the blind in order to see. And are you a hindrance to helping someone who is blind be able to see? And the moment you become the hindrance is the moment you should probably stop communicating and go back and check yourself. But a lot of times we become the blind person who is stuck and won't move because we've been waiting on someone else. Now that we can go deeper into that, but a lot of times we have an expectation that who we want to help us heal have to be the people to help us heal. And it's just not true. It's a lie. It's a whole lie that is out there. I think they used to have this meme that came out that said the same person who hurt you can't heal you. And we have this expectation that we want the people who hurt us to heal us. And it's not going to happen. You have to find healing within yourself. You have to work with your therapist and through the Lord in order to get and to seek that type of healing. But we choose to stay blind and to not move. And then we say things like, don't nobody care about me. Don't nobody really talk to me. We start saying these things that aren't true. You've just chosen to stay stuck into this space and not to move and not to grow. And because you've made that decision to stay blind, when people around you are like, hey, come on, let's go. Hey, go left. Hey, go right. And you're like, I'm just waiting, because you're waiting on one voice to tell you something. And God is like, that voice has moved on. Half the time it's somebody dead. You still waiting on an apology from your grandmother, your great grandmother, your cousin. Like, you're waiting for people to speak to you who have moved on with their lives. They've gone on, and you're still blind and still saying, I'm going to hold on to this this blindfold, and I'm going to refuse to see, because one day they'll come back and release me. And I would argue and I would state, is it release you want? And many people don't want to be able to see, because once you have the ability to see, you then have a requirement to do something with that sight. And now that you have been open and your eyes are open and you can move forward, now what do you do? And it can be overwhelming once you've been blind and you come back and see. Once you have been freed of blindness and you have the ability or any kind of impairment to your life. So yes, we're talking about the biblical blindness, but any kind of impairment that's holding you back, once you've been freed of that, it becomes overwhelming. And we don't talk about the overwhelming of freedom. Like, oh, I can do this, oh, I can do that. If no one has journeyed with you and you've just released yourself, if you've just woke up one day and say, I am the team of unbothered, and I don't care what people do, I don't care what people say, I'm gonna live my best life. But now you have to navigate that. Who's journeying with you? Because many times we go into isolation instead of finding people to journey with us. And we'll also do this, and my husband used the term the wrong team, the wrong committee. We will find people to co-sign our mess and then believe that we're getting free. Like, we will find the wrong committee. We will find the wrong committee to sit with us, to tell us everything we want to hear, everything we know, when deep down inside we know this stuff wrong. But we will find the wrong committee to co-sign, to agree with our shenanigans and our foolishness. And when other people attempt to push us, we then have a problem with it. We then don't want to be pushed. We just want to stay in where we're at. We want to stay with the wrong committee. We want to stay where we are located in the mind frame that we're in. But we are called to allow the blind to see. So you should be pushing back on people in your life who you know are struggling, and having conversations with them that really are pushing them to come out of this blindness that they're sitting in because they've been comfortable. I end the sermon with talking about that the oppressed will be set free. That's where the verse kind of ends. When we have the ability to live a communal faith, that is the moment that the oppressed will be set free. Unfortunately, we live in a world of pockets, and we believe that there are moments of freedom and liberation that are happening all over the world and in different spaces. But what would the world look like if we all recognize this is a communal faith? If we all sat with, nobody's free until we're all free. If we believe that into the depths of us, not just politically, but spiritually, as well as, I won't say but as difference of, but politically, spiritually, mentally, financially. Once one is free, we all need to be free. And once we have that understanding that we're in this thing together and we're all equally connected, that is when we will all be free and enter into the Lord's favor. So the way in which the scripture is laid out, we really have to sit with, what does that mean for us and our own salvation? How are you living out the mission of Jesus Christ in connection to you and your saved self? What does that mean for you? And if you're considering, let me go to Christianity. If you're looking at, okay, I want to be a Christian, or I used to be a Christian, but I ain't really down with that Christianity no more. Did you just find a bunch of wrong committee people to agree with you about what was happening? Because all y'all are held captive to your trauma and you're really not set free. You just live in a life that you call liberation, but internally you're stuck, and you're holding things in that you just have not released yet. So it's a matter of us really digging into, what does our salvation mean? How do we move forward? The mission to salvation is to be free, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That the mission of Jesus Christ, who says the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, is also for you to recognize that the Spirit of the Lord is equally upon you. And when the Spirit is upon you, you have the ability to do all of these things. That you don't have to sit in captivity, that you don't have to be blind, that you get to proclaim the good news even when you don't feel like the news is good. But that is the moment that God has the ability to step into your life and transform you. And that is the moment when you start living out your salvation, and the way in which you live and the way in which you see things tend to be different. And the way in which you manifest things out of your life move differently, is because it is at that moment when you say, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and you feel that power within the depths of you. And when you feel that power within the depths of you, then you have the ability to now do what God has called you to do. So the question to take yourself home with, or to go to bed with, or to sit with for the rest of the week really sits in, what was I saved from? What am I saved to? And how am I living out my salvation? What does that look like each and every day? What does it look like? Does it look like being just a good Christian? Or does it really look like I do these things to ensure that I'm living out my purpose and I'm getting healed within myself? Salvation means healing. I believe the Greek term for salvation is sozo, healing, healing and saving. So if you are saved, if you are someone who says, I'm saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Ghost, the Spirit of the Lord is upon you to be healed, to save yourself and others from the things that are happening in life. So go out and use your salvation for the good. Use your salvation in a world that's crumbling day by day. Use your salvation to fight for the injustices. Use your salvation to heal your body. Sometimes you got to heal from yourself. So use your salvation so that you can move in the purpose that God has called you for. So I'm going to get out of here. I hope this helps you on today. Hope everything goes well. I pray that you have a wonderful week, that God continues to show God's face on you, and that it shines bright, and that the Spirit of the Lord, when it comes upon you, you feel that power and move in that. So God bless y'all. Good night, and see you next week. Do 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 do. Bye. Do 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 do.